Could I get a raise of hands? Who here has ever been to live immersive theater in real life? Got one over here.
It's Mandy?
Andy,
About,
you've been, yes. Andy's been in immersive theater.
Have any of you been to any live theater in VR or XR? Raise of hands.
It's my first time in Old Space.
Ah,
Wow, nice. Welcome.
Good.
cool.
Yeah, I found the promo for this event on Discord, the Sing Thread EXR channel.
Cool.
Ah,
Well, welcome.
awesome.
Very nice.
I'm glad you saw my post.
Yeah, we do most of our work in VR chat, so that's where you'll typically find us. But Allspace is very good for giving talks like this. So.
Yeah, they have a very good
Ah.
sort of notification system with the,
Event
the
system, yeah.
panel on the front, and it's easier to do events in here.
Also
You know,
just easier
some
for
people
people
find
to
it
get
easier
in.
to navigate.
Yep.
Yeah.
Your chat can have a nice, powerful, like an event presentation hall, but getting people there is not nearly, of course.
It is
Or
not.
really
Yeah.
all us to sweat about. Got a Katie, Udo, Jake.
Hello. We were just talking about immersive theater a little bit. So there's a little bit of a difference between immersive theater and proscenium theater. Most everybody knows what proscenium theater is, or theater in the round like this one is. Well, this is like a half round, but it has a fourth wall. It's behind a proscenium, and you watch it and you do not interact. And that is an absolutely viable, fabulous way to do theater in VR. We tend to do immersive theater, which is more where we bring the audience into the experience and they play a part in the show. I personally feel like this is such a great platform for immersive theater versus proscenium theater, but both will work here. So when we talk about our show, you'll just hear a lot of stuff. You may hear things about how the audience interacts or talks to the actors. It's because we're doing immersive theater versus proscenium theater.
Yes. How I usually describe it to friends and family members who aren't familiar with it is think of it like stepping into a movie where all of the characters in the movie see you and respond to you, and you're suddenly a character within. Or perhaps a narrative game like Gone Home or something like that, except for instead of having pre-recorded NPCs, all of the characters you're interacting with are live people, live actors that are responding and reacting in real time. If that makes sense.
Does anybody here want to share a little bit about what they do in theater, or do we have any theater makers here? And how about raise your hand if you're a theater maker? Okay, we have at least two. That's lovely. How about actors? Do we have any actors out there? Raise your hand if you're an actor. Okay, we got at least.
Got a couple.
How about directors? Is there any directors out there who like direct plays and stuff like that?
All right, there
How
we
about
go.
developers? Do we have any developers out here?
Developers.
Ooh,
There we go.
that's
There we
yeah.
go.
We've got
There we
two
go.
developers.
Yes.
Yeah,
Got a smattering of those.
Right.
Awesome.
nice, nice. That's cool.
Our developers, what platforms or mediums have you worked in before?
I worked on Unity for an Android game, which was published on a local Android store, not the Play Store, because of sanctions and this sort of stuff. I'm working right now. I'm working with Unreal Engine to make a architectural simulation for Oculus Quest.
Ooh,
Very cool.
that sounds fun.
Fabulous. Great work.
Yeah.
But you, do you
Nice.
work in Unity as well, or Unreal maybe?
Yeah, I've been working in my day job. I work with Unreal Engine, but I've been using Unreal Engine for like, I don't know, like 8-9 years, something like that.
Wow.
Very
Nice.
cool.
Very cool.
That's- yeah, so this is pretty rudimentary for you, I'm sure.
Yeah, I build worlds here also.
Do you?
Ah, nice.
Fabulous. Lovely.
Great.
Well, maybe you're interested in having actors come in and do shows in your world.
Perform.
Yeah.
I was going to
Performing.
ask you about that.
Yeah, hopefully, even for people here that have significant development experience, it can give you some unique insight into how world building differs when you actually have to deal with your NPCs being live humans. Somewhat different
Yes.
challenge. So.
Absolutely. Chat for
Shall
Grain, I
we
see you've got
get
your hand
started?
raised.
Oh no.
Yeah, I've been working on developing
It's
a new
it's
Faith Internet
12:07.
studio
I kind of feel like
in here.
we've
or
got a good group here.
purchase, but they'll be able to come in, and I've got it so there's a green screen 3D ability for a pastor, and then a 180 3D spheres, which would have the inside of the church. Eventually, they'll be all one thing, but the quality, you can have a lot higher quality image with a 180 sphere if it's a photograph right now. Mainly because of the cameras inability, and then bring the pastor and the worship leaders in 3D on a blue screen so that they are embedded into the sphere.
Oh.
And
Very
the other
cool.
way is to have a church building in the front of the building be a 3D flat screen, the whole front of the church. And both those techniques would also incorporate 2D, because some people, it hurts their eyes to look at 3D.
It's ironic
Nice,
that you
that's
work with
very
green
awesome.
screens and that you would be invisible on a green screen. Is that irony? I don't know.
Windows Avatar.
I've got a blue screen for that purpose. It's a chroma key thing. It can be any
Nice.
color you want it to be. You can key out.
We'll be getting started here.
Yep.
I think it looks like we got a big group of people. We will do some introductions. We'll talk about some stuff up here, and then we'll do a Q&A. Now, throughout all of this, if there's specific questions, feel free to DM Deirdre. She can take questions, and we can work them in throughout the talk as well. But we're going to get started. I just wanted to give a special shout out to our camera gentlemen, Rick Tuazon and Carlos Austin, manning the cameras for all of your VR filming needs. Please reach out to those guys. They really knock it out of the park. We appreciate them. Welcome everybody to our second Alt Space panel. This is on world building. We are members of Ferryman Collective. The unexpected result of the world's current circumstances, i.e. the pandemic, has accelerated the growth of virtual reality, not only with VR films and games, but as a platform for theatrical performances with live actors and audiences in the same room virtually while staying physically distanced. VR theater offers the feeling of embodiment and immersion that closely mimics the experience of attending a theatrical event in person. Live production in virtual reality is an emerging new genre of storytelling that is vibrant and engaging. Even as we return to a more normal way of living, VR theater will continue to grow because of the richness of the experience, combined with the rapid growth of technological applications. So, to build or not to build within the metaverse. What is the metaverse? How do we build a VR world? And where do we build it? My name is Stephen Butchko. I'll be moderating this panel of theater makers as we explore answers to these questions. I'm a producer and performer on our current show, The Severance Theory, Welcome to Respite, which held its world premiere at this year's Tribeca Festival, its international premiere at this year's 78th Venice International Film Festival, its Asian premiere at this year's Kaohsiung Film Festival in Taiwan, and we are currently performing shows for the Rain Dance Immersive and of the Rain Dance Film Festival. Tickets are currently on sale now for our shows at theseverancetheory.com through November 21st, folks. We have over to my right, we have Deirdre Lyons. She is a producer and performer on Welcome to Respite. And then in the center there, Witten Frank is a performer and our marketing guru, Severance Theory. Welcome to Respite. Next to her, we have Braden Roy. He's a producer, art director, and lead of mechanical design on Welcome to Respite. Off to my left here, we have Brian Toll, who's a producer and world builder on the Severance Theory, Welcome to Respite. And then the mohawked gentleman to my right, that is Andy Aloisio, aka Joker, who is contributing to world building and programming on Severance Theory, Welcome to Respite. If you folks would like to learn more about any of us, please log on to theseverancetheory.com and you can find out more information about us and the show. So I ask Mr. Brian Tull, what is the metaverse and does it belong to Mark Zuckerberg?
God, let's hope not. What is the metaverse? Well, I don't think we have a metaverse yet. I think a lot of people are working on a metaverse. But yeah, a metaverse would be sort of a world in which all of these things can occur, which I think has a lot of potential for performance and for live theater. Because it would be lovely to have a space that we can all just inherit and sort of freely perform our works in a space where there aren't walls between, okay, this is one production, this is another production, sort of have a vast world of performance. And I think maybe the closest we've gotten is actually a show that these two over here were performing in. Deirdre and Witten come from The Underpresents, which was sort of a persistent world where the actors would come in and there wasn't sort of this wall between performances where you would just be exploring this game world and then suddenly the performance would come to you, which is a very interesting way to handle theater.
Very nice. So Mark Zuckerberg does not currently own it.
Not yet. He's working on it. Don't let him.
He's working on it. What Braden, what are some of the more popular and useful platforms used in VR production, or is there just one?
There's many. I mean, the two big ones are obviously Unity and the Unreal Engine, just due to their ubiquity of availability, resources for learning and collaborating, but also the cost of entry is fairly non-existent so long as you're not, in hundreds of thousands of dollars, and at that point you can afford it. Other than that, there's a lot of custom social platforms and such as Altspace itself, VR Chat, Neos, Rec Room, Horizon Worlds, which kind of give you a pre-built.
Don't forget about Mozilla Hubs. Onboard
and
XR.
Mozilla Hubs. Which that was going to be my next point. And then aside from those, which in place a very good starting point because you don't necessarily have to have a developmental background. You can just kind of jump in and use visual tools and workflows, and then dive deeper if you will. But another exciting thing is WebXR, WebVR using OpenGL, such as Zilla Hubs, which ultimately I don't think we're quite there right yet in terms of performance, though I'm sure plenty of people will understandably disagree with me there, and that's totally valid. But I'd say in 5 years from now, maybe, if we do ever have a fully fleshed metaverse as we would hope, where it is essentially the internet, but a spatial internet, I assume that that's the form that it'll take. It'll be a form of WebXR that's very performant and available across any and all devices, which OpenGL is probably the most straightforward way to use that in conjunction with OpenXR and OpenVR and WebXR standards. But other than that,
got it.
Yeah, I think
sky's the limit.
It might be useful to at this point to sort of to pick apart engine versus platform, right? Because So AltSpace, this here is what I would call a platform. And actually, this world, as Braden was alluding to, this world was done by a friend of ours, Rebecca Evans, which will hopefully be joining us here later. And yeah, so she designed this world using kits. Kits are what a lot of people use in AltSpace, which are basically, if you have what's called terraforming.
This world is just a common world.
Okay, what you can do in AltSpace, I guess, let's say, is there are objects which are simply available to you, which you can place in VR or on desktop and deal with it kind of like a world creation tool in a video game, right? Where you would open up something that was inside of the video game and you could sort of be in that world and be placing things down. That differs from what we typically do in VR chat, which the engine for VR chat is Unity. And that's actually the engine for that's actually used by AltSpace as well. You can import from Unity in AltSpace as well, and by other platforms like Neos. That is the most common engine that sort of has what I call a bridge between it and these common social platforms. So basically, we develop Unity, and then it's pretty much a simple process of just publishing VR chat. The vast majority of our work is done in Unity, and then we just push a button, and so long as we don't have anything VR chat doesn't like and won't let us publish, we can freely upload those worlds to VR chat. So the platforms, the way that the content is presented, are these things like AltSpace and VR chat and Neos. Then the engines, the way that we develop the content and get the content to the platform, these tools like Unreal Engine and Unity, and I think A-Frame is a thing. I know there are other engines outside of Unity, but those are the major ones. And yeah, I would say if you are interested in developing for social or for platforms like AltSpace and VR chat, Unity is probably the way to go, because that's where the existing bridges exist at the moment.
Got it. Hey, Joker. Brian mentioned a little while ago the underpresent, and it's a little bit of a different animal based on what's been discussed so far. Can you talk a little bit about why that differs, how it differs from how we work? And
talk about what the underpresents is and how
what's so special about their framework.
Or what it was anyway. Right now it's not that, but what it was.
Right. Yes.
That is a bespoke platform versus a social.
Right.
Yeah. As it happens, as I understand, so the underpresents that's an application that was developed by produced by Oculus Studios. I think I had this right. Produced by Oculus Studios, with the help of, I guess it was developed by Tender Claws, which is a
created by them. The
company,
concept was.
company, and funded and produced, I assume, by Oculus, and then there's somebody else I'm forgetting.
Casting is from Pi-hole, I believe.
Pi-hole, okay, sure. Pi-hole just did casting, so okay, cool. So this is the Underpresents is an app that you could get on the Oculus Store and on Steam, and it was kind of a combination of it did include a single player experience that was more or less like a game that was just set in the same universe as a multi-user space, which was a sort of I dare say a sort of open world experience that included immersive improv theater parts where you'd be in this space with other people, and occasionally, somewhat predictably, actors would show up, like these two folks here, or two of them. And then in addition to that, there were live performances that were more like a set theater performance, but they themselves were immersive. Shakespeare's Tempest was they did a few runs of that, and that was of a similar style where you were sort of in the story, and the actor who was leading the production sort of brought you into it. But from a development perspective, which is I think the focus Steve wanted me to give this, yeah, this was like the Underpresents was developed using the Unity engine. It was built using Unity and released as an app, like on the Oculus Store and on Steam. It was not itself a platform because the users didn't have tools to create within it. They didn't create their own experiences. I mean, maybe by a very, very forgiving definition of platform, because in a sense, the actors were given tools to create experiences for the users, right? Like they had an interface that let them sort of create props within the world and use them to create an experience in the moment. So by a very broad definition, like, yeah, it was a platform for the actors, but it wasn't really a user content platform like Altspace's user content, because any user can come in. And I think the one important bit that Brian left out was the SDK, right? Software Development Kit is what that stands for. Like user generated content platforms will typically have an SDK. Altspace has an SDK that I have not used. An SDK usually means like you have an editor interface, and then there's a series of tools that let you work with, what's called an API, right? The platform itself gives you an interface, and access to their platform, and lets you plug what you need into the right places to make the kind of experience that you want to make. VR Chats SDK is something that it's a series of sort of tools that you install into the Unity editor, and when you upload the content, the content that you create, VR Chat says, okay, you've created this with our SDK, and it checks to make sure it follows all of the rules that you need to follow to make content for VR Chat, and that's how that works. And we followed all those rules to make content for Welcome to Respite.
I don't know if we want to get too much into the weeds on Udon specifically, but would you mind commenting a bit, Joker, about how that sort of differs from bespoke programming, and why social platforms don't give us direct access to C# to use other people's computers as the core
that's a great question. I was also going to ask, there's going to be a little bit of overlapping now, but my next question was with regard to do we build, is it preferred to work with bespoke apps? Can we produce these things on social platforms? Can we just produce a show in a world that already exists in Altspace? And what are the drawbacks, benefits to those things? So, yeah, what Brian said. Go ahead.
Is this a question for me?
I'm just going to throw this out to everybody, but Brian specifically was asking you to comment about Udon and with regard to
so I'll go ahead. Yeah,
platforms.
I'll go ahead and answer that a little bit first, I guess. So, the more powerful the tools you have, the more you can make what you're creating fit the idea that you have, right? Like, I guess take that as the basic, most important premise of this. So, of the sort of platform. So I guess the most powerful, most power you can have is you create your own app, right? And you have almost complete power, right? If you're even if you're using an engine like Unity, that does come with its own sort of set of constraints and limitations. But when you're building at that level, you have more or less complete control to make something really performance intensive and highly detailed. But what you lose out on, first of all, more power is more responsibility. So you have a lot more that you need to take care of and maintain. You also sort of lose a little bit of accessibility. So we as a team do not currently have the know-how, the skills, the experience, the training to do all of the stuff that's necessary to create an app that we could like put out on the Oculus Store, have people wander into and say, oh wow, what is this? This is VR live theater. This is really cool. We don't have that yet. The benefit of things of VR chat to us, but also platforms like Altspace, Rec Room, Neos. Neos is doing the Meta movie right now, and Mozilla Hubs with Onboard XR. The benefit of those is that we don't have to cover those things like getting people connected to a networked session, which is what we're all in right now, right? You had a menu, you clicked a button, you loaded into this session. Like the internet is running its internet things under the hood. We didn't have to figure that out. You all didn't have to figure that out. Altspace is doing that for you. VR chat does that for us. So that is power. Like we don't have the power to control that, but we also don't have the responsibility. There's disadvantages there sometimes. Like we can't really craft we can't really craft networking carefully to be reliable in exactly the way that we want. It's hard to come up with an example of that. The other one is really basic things like a player controller. So a player controller is, I am a player. I'm a thing that I am one of this world is full of objects, and this thing that you see in front of you that you're identifying with me, this is actually just an object in the world that's controlled by something. Yeah. But this is a player controller. We didn't have to design this. In VR chat, we didn't have to design that. But I have to work within the constraints of what VR chat gives me, and that's not always super easy. That's actually sometimes very limiting. But designing it from the ground up would have been an absolute pain. So not having that responsibility is a big advantage. The other thing is accessibility. So we could release an app on the Oculus Store and be like, hey, we're done. There's our app. And then we'd advertise the crap out of it with the money the advertising budget that we don't have. And maybe people would show up. But with something like, especially with Altspace is a great example because the event system is like, that's free. That's more or less free advertising. I mean, it's probably for denizens of Altspace that you're probably thinking, oh, it's more complicated than that. But Altspace does work, right? It does work for you to get people into your event. VR chat actually doesn't so much. They're okay about it, but there's some avenues for like getting people into like the thing that you created, in this case our show. But it would be, I guess, maybe the big thing that the way to frame it is a platform that already exists. People can say, oh, okay, I've heard of VR chat before. Maybe they have such and such impression of, or I've heard of Altspace before. That is a legitimate, credible application. That makes sense for me to go download this. I know it's supported. It's going to be a relatively, smooth experience to use it. I feel comfortable using that and using that as a medium to go to this production that I've seen advertised. If we were just making our own app, then it would be a little bit of like, who are these people? What is this app? Do I really want to download this? Do I want to use this? Is this going to be good at all? So, those are the things that sort of lift us up, put the stage under us for doing productions like this. I didn't talk about Adon at all. Sorry. I can. I don't want to
we can come back to that. Braden.
I think you kind of covered the same general purpose, nonetheless, even if you didn't touch on it specifically. So everything Andy just said is absolutely true. However, there's a few things that you might want to consider if you still want to make your own bespoke app experience. It has live multiplayer aspects or live performance, that sort of thing. And that is that there's a few different middleware tools available that can kind of do some of the heavy lifting for you. You'll still need to go through and customize things and make it work however you want it to work. Unity, biggest one is probably Photon, and then there's Normcore also. And they just recently announced a new service called Unity Gaming Services, which I haven't looked too deeply into, but allegedly will do a lot of that heavy lifting for you in terms of getting synchronized player objects and game objects in the same space and VoIP and all that fun stuff. But even with that, while it does simplify things, you do still have to kind of make it your own. More than anything, once you're on your own bespoke app, your company, whoever you might be paying or not paying, are directly responsible for all maintenance and upkeep logistically, and that includes even if you don't need to worry about the networking aspects quite as much should you choose to use the middleware tools available. Like right now, if you make something in an alt space, let's say that you do a show or an event or a game of some sort in alt space or VR chat or rec room or what have you, and the servers go down. Now that sucks, especially if you have something scheduled, a live event, or you just put out some advertising to get some people to go to it, only to find like, oh, I just put advertising for this date and now the platform is done and there's nothing I can do. That sucks. However, your hands are free. You don't need to put your resources towards fixing those things. It's kind of handled for you. Whereas if you have a bespoke app and something like that happens, well, it's probably expected. You were probably making changes, or someone on your team was making changes, and you could kind of prepare and schedule around it and making sure maintenance wasn't done except for during certain periods of time. Nonetheless, something breaks, you have to fix. You have to put resources towards that, which might otherwise go to a wide variety of other things, be it asset acquisition or creation or paying talent for a variety of different services. That's kind of the biggest thing on top of everything that Andy covered so eloquently. Is the onus is on you to fix things when they break, and you need to make sure that you are ready for that from a logistic standpoint and resource standpoint. But those middleware things are an option to somewhat ease the pain should you choose to go that route.
My God, sounds absolutely stressful. Go ahead, Brian.
I have one more comment that is useful if you are considering bespoke. That's hosting. VR Chat hosts all of the VR Chat, Altspace host all of your content on their servers, and they pay for their servers. They pay probably thousands and thousands of dollars a month for their servers. You cannot. Second, can you hear me? Okay, I'm back. That was interesting. But yeah, so you can use Amazon Web Services. You can have your own server, but typically there is a cost associated with the amount of data that is being streamed to and from the occupants of your world. So in VR Chat, we could potentially have thousands of people through a month. That costs us $0. Like there is no cost that based on the scaling of our experience. Whereas if you are doing your own bespoke app, then you have to think, oh, if this explodes in popularity, that's great, but suddenly our hosting bills are getting, significantly higher. So one of the wonderful things about development in VR is that it's so damn affordable. I mean, you can go on the Unity Asset Store, you can find a lot of free stuff, you can find a lot of affordable stuff, and of course, we don't have to worry about the cost for storing these worlds and all those things. So it's a very, very accessible platform. But then once you start to talk about a bespoke app, you're running into the potential of spending a significant amount of money just so you can continue to run the show. That's something to consider as well.
Got it. Did Andy, did you want to speak a little bit more about Udon? What was your specific question, Brian?
Basically, just sort of, why does Udon exist? Like, why does VR Chat not give us direct access to C# and sort of what is the difference in that?
Yeah. So just like as a little bit of an introduction, I wish I presume a lot of you in here are probably like our regular Altspace users, and I wish that I had more experience using the Altspace SDK so that I could draw sort of parallels. I can't, but So what creation tools aim to do is give you the most, give users as much power to create as it can, while also sort of keeping them on rails, right? So that you don't go off the rails and have a train wreck, right? Great analogy. Now, most platforms call it good by giving you like a handful of prefabricated tools. They think about what are the most common needs for creators. Like, okay, you need to be able to create shapes, maybe manipulate shapes, like geometry in your world. You need to make a box, a sphere, a cylinder. You carve a hole out of it, whatever, and then add materials. That's the art side of it, and then it's for functionality, right? Maybe you need to be able to do logic with players and what their names are, where they are in the world, how fast they're moving, maybe teleport them around a little bit, determine a little bit about like what makes this player different from what makes this group of players different from these group of players. Are they on the red team? Are they on the blue team? What permissions does the red team have? Can they go into this area while the blue team can't? Logic like that, right? So creative platforms try and think about those most common needs. My background is from Rec Room, so I'm saying things in terms of like red team, blue team players, because anyone's played Rec Room, a lot of the content you see there is just games, fun action games, and you put people in, do a lot of putting people on teams and arranging them, and that's where the logic usually goes. So those are most common needs. VR Chat took the approach of just really trying to not even think about needs and starting with just giving the creators, frankly, too much power. Their approach was, we want to make your creative tools for our platform, VR Chat. We want to make it as close to independent development of a game as we can. We want to make it as close to actually programming and coding as we can. Now, their only limitation was, okay, we need to do it in such a way that isn't a security risk to the ultimate users of the stuff that people are creating. So because when you load up an app that somebody has made, you are giving them access to your hardware and all of the stuff installed. The security is a thing, but you're giving them pretty deep access into your personal computer in a lot of cases, and that is dangerous. That incurs liability. And VR Chat didn't want to make themselves responsible for all of the crazy stuff people might do. So what Udon seeks to do is basically just say, okay, we are giving you all the power we possibly can, minus these things that need to be, denied to you for security. So Udon is essentially a programming language. It tries to be as much like C# as possible. C# is currently it's the main language used for Unity development. They give you, as part of their SDK, a node-based programming language. For anyone who's done, how do I describe node-based programming language? Node-based is essentially just like it gives you a 2D sort of what's called a graph, and you do logic by using sort of nodes that represent a thing that's happening, and you draw lines between them. It's meant to be like circuitry, like electrical engineering. Like you do logic with electrical engineering, and it tries to make the same thing happen but with nodes. And that tries to emulate C# as much as possible. Cutting out a lot of the story, the Udon also has available a C# compiler that lets you just write essentially C# code minus a lot of stuff, and that will compile to like the logic you create in your world. So Welcome to Respite was created, the first round that we did, I did everything using the node-based programming, and that was cool. You can go on Twitter and see the screenshots I took of the logic, like the logic graphs that I created to control parts of the production after we first did our first run. And these graphs are just like enormous and complicated. and as readable as I could make them, but they were like these huge, like poster size, just like, how do you even see what this is? And later I moved on to actually writing, what you would normally think of it as like actual code, like text-based code. I think I did. Yeah, I think I've described what Udon is. That it's a really powerful part of the VR Chat SDK. It's I would say some of the most powerful stuff you can get that I've seen. Some of those powerful stuff you can get short of actually just doing something like with Onboard XR. They had access to Mozilla Hubs. They just did they created a custom instance of Mozilla Hubs, and they actually just had the ability to write actual JavaScript code to create their own behaviors within that production. So Udon is as close as you can get to that without being like real coding your own work.
Got it. Thank you.
One thing that
go ahead.
One thing that you mentioned, sorry, I did just because you had mentioned it as part of our previous question. I don't think we touched on it. Do you need to world build? And no, you don't really need to world build. If you don't want to,
that was my
great to. Yeah.
That was my next question was so if and I'll throw this out to you and the rest of the devs up here. If you're like me, I don't understand much of any of this. How much of this do I need to know? Say we want to produce our show. How much of this do we need to know? Do we need to know C# and
Zero?
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I think it's yeah, it really depends upon what your needs are. There are a lot of amazing worlds out there, and I think one of the big challenges and something we're still figuring out is sort of how do we manage the rights and ownership in a virtual world, because you generally have pretty free access to everything that's been released in VR Chat. There are very few worlds that are private that you have to get a link to be able to access them. So you can go into whatever world and do whatever you want in it. Does that then give you the right to put it on a performance in anyone's world without letting them know? Technically, yes, you can do that. There's nothing stopping you. You might anger the world owner if you're starting to do a production where you're making money and you're using their world without their permissions. So I think that there's still a lot to be figured out. I think there's a lot of opportunities for creators to build venues and to have sort of a nominal fee that we charge to rent out the space like you would in any sort of real life venue. But as it stands, you could put on a show right now. You could go in that hallway over there and you could start recording and you could do a little thing and we couldn't stop you. And so that is, it's a totally valid option right now. Is find yourself a VR chat world, find yourself an Altspace world that is interesting to you, that has the sort of visual elements that you like, and just do a show. You might not have props you can work with, but you have the space. Just have to come up with the script and your actors, and you pretty much have everything that you need to have. I mean, in terms of going another layer above that, Joker was touching on all of the things that you can do in Udon, and his work in Udon is wonderful and has really allowed us to do a ton more with this recent show versus our previous shows. But I did all the programming for our previous shows, and I am not a good programmer. So you can do much of what you really need to do. Very simple functions that I think you can probably figure out pretty quickly. So yeah, there's all sorts of levels. I mean, on the most extreme end, you don't even need to use Unity. You can write your own engine. I think that would require you to be a crazy person, but there are people that do it. But yes, there are many different modes of accessibility. Braden?
So, adding on top of that, there are so many different communities that are hobbyists and professionals that are out there that their entire purpose is to help people create things, not necessarily live performance or live theater in XR or VR, but willing to help if you're wanting to make something like what we did with Welcome to Respite. A great community, as an example, that might not be entirely hands-on in the process, but provides tons of different prefabs, things that are pre-created, is the ERC prefabs community, who is just a group of super talented folks that create different prefabs, which are like an engine, not an engine, but like a component in something that you can kind of just drop in and it works. And it's, on top of that, communities like XR Social Club, which is just a social club of people who come together and happen to work in the XR industry. All of these are great places to go and just kind of ask questions. Different Discords and subreddits that are dedicated to the creation of things with tons of people that are ready to get their hands dirty, and oftentimes free. Not that you want to abuse that, of course, but it's there for you. There's plenty of resources available, both in terms of videos and wikis, but also individual people that are ready to help.
Fantastic. Witten, did you have? I'm sorry. Did you have something to? You had a question or something to add to?
Since we're primarily a group of creators, I mean, working all together, and that's sort of our main thing. Maybe we could talk a little bit about what are the things that, as a developer, or once you've picked your platform and decided how you're going to do it, some things that you might have to think about in creating a world or building a world that is specifically designed for live interaction versus a standard game. More specifically, theatrical interaction versus just something like this, where you have one person talking at a time and it's very formal, or even just an elevated chat program, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think a lot of this, that like when you're creating for theater, you do have some specific concerns about sound, about mobility, how things function that ordinarily would be behind the curtain. Right? So props, how do you, where do you place those? How do you get those? Way that sound travels in the space. Mm-hmm. How can your actors manage scene transitions or costume changes? A lot of things that when you're just developing a game, right, you don't really have to think about because it's all preset for the most part. These are things that we have to do live in addition to performing. So I think the things that I've listed are all things that if you want to develop a theatrical piece or be performed live in VR, you have to start thinking about it as this kind of weird amalgamation of game strategy, theater, and performance knowledge, as well as all of the behind the scenes stuff that either you have to have a separate crew, is invisible somehow, or you have to give your performers the tools to manage all of that as the show goes on.
That's a great lead into, and my next question was going to be all of that, and in addition to what Witten is talking about, world size with regard to the type of stuff that we produce.
I do want to.
Is it for limited or whatnot? Go ahead.
Pause for moderation's sake. It's coming up on 10 minutes of the hour, and I do want to remark. I did and at least when I was talking, I noticed a few people up here had put their hands up. So I know we have questions, and I want to make sure we get to those.
We can certainly ask. People can ask those now, and we can work them into the things that Witten was talking about.
Or a good idea.
I could do a little spiel on what Witten was talking about. I probably have that boiled down because I've talked about that before. I could do a little spiel, and then we could just try and jump right into Q&A.
Sure.
What do you think?
Yeah, go ahead and do that.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, well, like Witten said, like there's a big difference between an experience in VR. Like you guys, again, I wish I'd experienced Alt Space more so I could draw parallels. But in VR chat, there are lots of places where you go in, and it's like, here's the experience you've laid out. You go from A to B to C to E, and then that's the end of the experience. Thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed this. Lots of other VR titles have this. Right now, the one that's coming to mind is a wonderful app on Oculus. Or no, it's not on Oculus actually. It's called oh god, what's the one with the this World War II with the Japanese Canadians? Book of Distance. Okay, so the Book of Distance is this great. It's a single player experience. You go in, and it tells you a story, and you go from scene to scene, and in pretty much each scene you're given a little bit of interaction. Like it shows you the story with lots of beautiful images and sound and everything and great production. And then it pauses for a moment and gives you like, you have to perform a little task that just sort of gives you a little bit of embodiment and puts you in the scene. And it's wonderful. That was probably pretty easy to design because the user is really on rails, right? There's not much they can do to throw off everything and sort of break the logic of the story that's being told. On the other side of the spectrum is what we're, well, almost on the other side of the spectrum is what we're doing. We do have a story. The script has a beginning and an end. There's things that do need to happen. There's points we need to hit throughout the story. But in between, the whole, what makes it really live is what the audience, the way the sort of audience steers what's happening and how the actors react to that, right? Well, the way our show is set up, we've got one audience member is the character, and they are allowed and encouraged to speak and sort of make. I'm still here, okay, and sort of make their own part of the story. And designing the experience, we had to account for that. Like, there's objects that this audience member can pick up and deal with. There are events that they can trigger in order or out of order. They can say one thing. They can run around and be in a different space. Whereas actors on a stage giving a production, they have to sort of hit their mark. You know where they're going to be. Backstage, the production people know how to account for that. We can't account for that with the audience. So there's flexibility that in designing this we had to make sure and put in there. We had to make sure and give the people who are managing the production, who are also the actors who are acting in it, we had to give them powerful and flexible enough tools to maintain control of the production, while also allowing the story to, have that latitude to make it feel more alive, and more like it was, the audience members were characters in it. That felt like what I usually say for that. So was that satisfactory? Okay.
That's very much just like
I killed
designing for
Witten.
asynchronous user experience in essence. You're designing UX for actors, UX for at least one type of audience member, and possibly multiple types of audience members that are kind of.
Oh, there's one thing I left out. I wanted to touch on. I said almost on the other end of the spectrum. Actually, on the other end of the spectrum is a production I want to manage because I want to mention because I love it so much. There is actually live action role play productions that happen in VR chat, and there's barely any script at all. Everybody, like all the role players, are the actors, and there is no telling what's going to happen by the end of it. There's nothing that needs to happen. The game master is going to try to make you take the hook and tell the story that they want to tell, but there's no guarantee. So those people are like that's the next level of flexibility that we thankfully didn't have to manage. But that is a thing that happened that's possible in VR.
So much to cover. We could just keep going, but we have a few minutes left. Let's open it up to people that might have questions. Go ahead and raise your hand. Anybody that has a question there? Yeah.
Dev Pirate?
Yes, Dev Pirate. Go ahead.
Okay. Thanks for your amazing presentation. I really learned a lot from it. I'm gonna ask my question with an example first. I think it'll be easier this way. When internet taxis came to my city at first, there was only one application in the... I got muted. Okay, can you hear me now?
For a second.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, so when internet taxis came to my city, there was only one app for the first week. In the second week, they made another app. And next month, there were like 100 internet taxi applications in my city. Now, after like 3 or 4 years, there are only 2 applications in my app store for online internet taxis. Right now, I'm concerned that maybe the same thing would happen to VR chat, Old Space, now especially with the trailer of Horizon Worlds. Maybe Facebook would come in and take over all of these platforms. Now, as a developer who might want to work on like VR chat, primarily, I would be concerned about that. What if VR chat gets busted? It'll be out of the game. What if Horizon Worlds take over that? What should I do then? This is one of
I
my
suppose-
concerns, which I would likely be addressed. It's okay.
I suppose that to a certain extent, from a user perspective or a user who's creating content in these different social platforms, there's not too much you can do to prepare for that outside of being prepared to be unprepared, so to speak, and knowing that different things that happen are going to be somewhat out of your hands. Like, it's possible. I mean, like, AltSpace was recently purchased by Microsoft, and they could have made drastic changes. They haven't, for the most part. But I would say that the best thing that you could do outside of kind of having a plan B to pivot in the event that something were to happen, and also like paying attention to news surrounding any platform that you're following, so that you kind of have an idea of what might be on the horizon, is to kind of look at the different platforms and figure out what niche each one is kind of addressing. Like with the internet taxi example that you gave, a lot of that, it was kind of like a gold rush, where everyone was kind of rushing to fill the same niche all at the same time. And because of that, all of these different services, which essentially did exactly the same thing and were serving the exact same user base, they cannibalized each other or were not able to survive. So when looking at a social platform, make sure that you're taking into account not just from a survivability standpoint of making sure that the platform sticks around, but also for how you're using it. You need to look at what that platform is servicing, what users, what niche, and making sure that it's not a complete overlap of an existing one, because then you might be at risk. If that makes sense.
I have a little bit of I also have another part of an answer to that, and that is, I think as a developer, you'll understand this. Manage the stuff that you've created and keep it portable, right? The actual part of the beauty of VR chat is that they do like, I think they own the final thing that we uploaded, like the asset pack. But that's not really anything that's usable by them. We still have ownership of all the code that I've written, the assets that we bought from the asset store, the art that we created, the lighting we built. We still have ownership of all of that. Yep. And so if we
and all that.
and the script and the story, we own all of that. But from a technical perspective, more keep the stuff that you made organized. Keep track, keep it as unintegrated and independent from the platform as you can manage. You can't always manage a lot, but you can manage as much as you can. So if VRChat turned around tomorrow and said, "We're done. You're not allowed to do this on our platform anymore," there's no way they would. They're very friendly. But if they did, then we could try to find a new home for this kind of production. And I think that probably generalizes for other stuff. So yeah, we're gonna have to move on to probably.
Yeah, I think we've got we have time for one more question. Chap for Green, go ahead and ask your question. Then we're gonna close, and then some of us can stick around if you have further questions. I think
I'll make sure and stick around for sure.
Actually,
do that.
have
Yeah,
three
go ahead.
things now. What he was saying and you're saying is make it so your content can be used on multiple platforms. So when one shuts down, you're still already going into other platforms. The other thing was, I think what he in here to do SDKs, there's you write it in MREs, and I think that's kind of what you were talking about for VR chat, the different name. And I forgot the third thing now. The third thing was what I wanted to. Are you talking about having a physical stage, a theater, being in these different social medias? Is that what
You mean like this, like a literal?
No, a physical stage, in real life stage.
Oh,
You brought in.
We do not.
Some people do. It's been done.
Yeah.
Where there's it's location based VR where a person will go to a venue, like The Void is a popular one. What we were doing is purely virtual, where any audience member can join from their home.
So it's not a face to avatar relationship. I mean, a physical face. You were talking about.
Not so much. It's more avatar to avatar, though we've put a lot of work
Okay.
into making sure that our performance is very embodied, where it feels as though it is
Mhm.
face to face.
Okay. Because I can
Seems
show
like
you how to
people
do
still
a face
get-
to avatar relationship where the person is in front of a camera, the monitor, so they can see the avatars that are
Oh,
in
right,
front of
yeah.
them.
Oh.
And they
Face
can
tracking stuff.
communicate back and forth.
Mhm.
Yep.
Um,
I know Neos. That's technology that Neos supports, like the VR face tracking technology that exists. You can also do it with a webcam and stuff like that. VR chat. A little bit of news for VR chat. Actually, not this isn't news at all. This is like 6 months ago. They did a dev stream where they announced that on their roadmap for production is they're going to create a layer of compatibility that allows people to create their own sort of interfaces or input devices like, for example, face tracking, like the VR face tracking technology, but also something like a webcam or a phone that allows you to take the data, and process it like you're talking about, and have a place for it to go within the VR chat like API, and then you can process it and make it, drive the facial, like the components of the avatar face. You can make it drive the eyebrows and the lips, and the pupils and everything to really get facial expressions. That in addition to lots of other like limb tracking and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
yeah,
but
that is something that's coming to
I
VR
will
chat
say-
at least.
Oh,
it's not exactly what
I will
I'm
say
talking about,
interestingly,
but that's interesting. We're looking into that stuff too.
I will say interestingly though, for performance, we've found that exact facial expression is not necessary for people to feel the intimacy and emotion of a performance, which is really interesting in VR. That even just with the voice and movement, if your face isn't, you don't get to read all of the complex human quirks and emotions, the audience still retains the emotional weight and intimacy of a physical performance. That's at least the feedback we've gotten, which I think is really fascinating. But you don't need the sort of exact mirroring facial expression to achieve.
Kind of in between,
I have a
TV
question.
and video and radio.
Mhm.
In
Over here.
between, almost
I have a
like it was
question.
puppets.
Yeah.
All right,
Um,
Gregory. This will be the last question, folks.
Oh, okay. So I
at
haven't
least
heard
for-
anybody. What's that?
Oh, no, go ahead, Gregory.
So I haven't heard anybody mention Sansar. Maybe it was mentioned in a list of metaverses that was rattled off, but I've done a lot of work in Sansar and Neos. I just think, VR chat and Rec Room and some of the other platforms, if I were, a legit performer with a long career, I'd be focusing on the stuff that's not quite baked yet, that's got the potential to do what performers really want to be doing. I think those two platforms are much further along. Sansar, I've been events at Sansar where people are performing and singing and around a campfire, and it's just amazing to be, present in some of those spaces. They self-organize, they're well managed, they're fun. The latency and the technical issues seem to be not such a problem. But I would encourage people to check out Sansar and Neos, and if they're going to do development, they look at those two metaverses. They're a little harder to work in, but
Yeah,
they've
I
got
would
such
certainly
great
agree with
capabilities.
that. I absolutely would. And I know Neos is doing Alien Rescue with the meta movie, and it's fantastic. The reason we stay away from it is because it's not Quest friendly. And we really are trying to build audiences in this world, in this space, because a lot of people don't know VR theater exists. If you take away Quest and Quest friendly worlds, you're losing so many of your audiences. We're trying to build up awareness and our audiences, and then when it's more well known, the technology is going to be better. But to get into Sansar and Neos, you have to at least spend $2,000 on a computer and a headset. Not everybody has that, but maybe they brought their kid an Oculus for Christmas, and they're interested in VR theater as an adult, and they find out that there's a show and they can borrow it from little Jimmy and go in and see a show and go, wow, there's so much here, and then maybe they'll upgrade to those other expensive equipment. But
Yeah.
certainly I understand where you're coming from. But that's the choice we made.
To add a little bit to that, like
and the Optimist, the
Yeah.
optimization and the
Yep.
onboarding is so much easier with these other platforms. So it
Sure.
makes sense.
lots
if
of
you want
respect.
an
We
audience.
we know the folks who did the Alien Rescue meta movie. Jason Moore, I think Moore's his last
Yeah.
name.
Mhm.
Yeah, we like
Yeah.
much respect to what they did, and it's really cool. But yeah, we've been doing the sort of festival circuit, and we've had people coming in from festivals where we're giving this production, and I would say at least like 90% of these folks are on Quest, right?
Yeah.
More than that,
Yeah.
it's got to be. So
Yes.
all of that festival like exposure, it's just we'd love to have it. And I talked about power, right? Neos is extremely powerful. Neos might even be closer to because it tries to emulate the Unity editor itself, like as an application. It's super powerful. But it's everything's got its trade-offs. Thanks for the pitch. Like VR Chat has served us well, but it's definitely not the only platform. There's gonna be others in the future. And we'll see how well. I know that Neos is at least trying to. They're working on Quest support, so we'll see.
That's
So,
it. Hey, everybody,
accessibility and
we are
affordability. That's part of our concern.
exactly. We are over time. We're gonna call it for now. Thanks everybody for showing up. Thank you, folks, for showing up for this. Tickets still on sale for The Severance Theory. Welcome to Respite at theseverancetheory.com for Rain Dance. Get your tickets now. And also special another shout out to Rick Tuazon and Carlos Austin, our camera crew, floated around and captured all of this. Thank you, gentlemen, so much. And if you guys want to stay around for a little bit, we can answer more questions.
I'll stick around for another till 20 past, I think.
I'll hang out as
Yeah,
well.
if somebody
I'll
has
stick around as well.